Okay, there we go. All right. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us and welcome to our panel, Keep Your Door Open. So this event is held in honor of Teen Dating Violence Awareness Month, which is this month of February. And this event is brought to you by Narika. Narika is a Bay Area-based nonprofit which provides free and confidential support and services for survivors of domestic violence, especially from immigrant and South Asian populations. So you may be wondering why Keep Your Door Open? I kind of chose this title because Keep Your Door Open is something a lot of kids and teenagers are used to hearing growing up. It's something I never personally experienced, but I know a lot of my friends did. And oftentimes you may hear when young people protest this kind of keep your door open policy, they might hear something like my house, my rules, or what do you need privacy for? What are you hiding? These kinds of questions, right? I even once knew a family, I think in middle school, that actually removed their teenage daughter's door, like pulled it off the hinges because she had slammed it once. I think they had some kind of fight. So there's just a lot of policies around doors in the house. It's kind of like doors are seen as a symbol of privacy. There are boundaries that we draw up to separate spaces. And for a lot of young people, their room becomes their first personal space, and that is demarcated by their door. So in this sense, doors are a symbol of privacy, of personal space and respect, but also a site of parental rules and supervision. But on the other hand, doors are also a symbol of openness and trust. So you may have heard the phrase, my door is always open, from someone who cares about you. So an open door is also a welcoming sign and an opportunity given to us by loved ones. So this panel is kind of a place to discuss these multi-layered meanings, especially within the context of teen dating violence, which does affect 1 in 3 young people in the United States. So I'm thrilled to introduce our amazing host and speakers and experts who will be offering their insights into this complicated topic. So first we have Shalini Dayal. So Shalini is a licensed marriage, family, and child therapist and co-founder of Basant Now. She was a radio host and frequent speaker at workshops and seminars on mental health topics. And with over 20 years of clinical experience, she provides care for individuals experiencing depression, anxiety, marital problems, parenting, and intergenerational challenges. We also have Melissa. Melissa Espinoza is the Youth Services Program Manager at Safe Alternatives for Violent Environments, also known as SAVE, in Fremont, where she's been supporting the Youth Services Program for the past 6 years. Melissa engages youth, schools, parents, communities, and allies in advocating for healthy relationship conversations in their communities. And last but not least, Shailaja Dikshit. Shailaja recently joined as Narika's executive director after 10 plus years in the field of domestic violence advocacy, management, and leadership. And she is excited to be here and looking forward to building healthier communities together. My name is Sonia. I'm community engagement lead also at Narika, and I will be facilitating this discussion. We also have Chet Dial, who will be helping support with chat management. So please, if you have any questions or comments throughout this panel discussion, please put them in the chat and we'll try to open up for Q&A and address some of those questions at the end of the discussion. All right, is everyone ready to talk? Cool, okay. So for my first question, I wanted to ask Melissa. So given your work in engaging youth, can you please first just define for us what teen dating violence is and share what it is that teens experience?
Sure, definitely. So teen dating violence is when one partner is using abusive behaviors to gain power and control over their partner, and they do that through different tactics. Just like adult relationships and intimate partner violence, youth experience the same type of abuses, just in different, like I said, different tactics. And then the resources for youth are also harder because they are younger, right? They're underage. So as you said, it's a very common thing, happens 1 out of 3, that's our national number. So it's a big number, and that's why we're having a conversation. The different tactics that they see are, you can have the humiliation happening where maybe during an argument, your partner puts you down, makes you feel bad about yourself. There's the control where every time maybe that you go out with your friend, your partner is texting you and accusing you to get into argument, maybe like you're accusing you of cheating. And again, just ruining your night. The pressures, we all know the different pressures, even pressures like, if I buy you an expensive gift, I'm going to expect sex back, or the isolation that we see so often too, where at school your partner maybe not letting you hang out with your friends, isolating from your friends group, and the intimidation where, again, just throwing things in arguments, making it dangerous. Gaslighting in relationships is also another one, your threats. And then the one that we see a lot with youth, where it's like constantly checking in and checking up, making their partner, you know, check in constantly to see what they're doing, who they're with, and, you know, just where their whereabouts are at. So just different examples that we come across in the work.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. That certainly sounds, as you mentioned, similar to a lot of other relationship violence and domestic violence, which at Narika we're most familiar with, but also very complicated in a lot of ways as well. And since I know that there's a lot of myths surrounding domestic violence, what are some myths or misconceptions around teen dating violence that maybe people aren't as aware of?
Sure, there's many. So we hear often that only men perpetuate dating violence or domestic violence, but the reality is that it happens in all relationships, heterosexual, LGBT ones, and at any stage, right? When they're dating, where they're engaged, married, or even after a breakup. There's also a lot of myths that exist out there around that dating violence only happens in hetero relationships, but again, it happens in all, within all genders and sexualities, where everyone can be abusive and be abused. Other things that happen that we hear often is that, you know, it's only physical violence. And the reality is, what we hear more and see more is the emotional abuse experiences. Other things that we see are, you know, with the realities now with the youth is, you know, it can happen to everyone. We see so many examples where we have the straight A students, your athletes, who are dealing with abusive relationships. We have examples where we see younger youth who are starting to date and are engaging in sex and are needing support. We have the new reality that dating is not as traditional as it used to be. You're not meeting at school most of the times. For some, yeah, but the reality is now it's through apps. So we have to, you know, get in with the new realities and learn about that. So I'm really happy that Narika put on this panel for us so that parents in the community can bring awareness. You know, we can bring awareness to the issues and to start this conversation. And we hope that through the conversation that we have today and the resources that we share, that you all feel supported, that there is hope out there and you can have these conversations with your youth.
Yeah, that's really great and hopefully really inspiring to a lot of our attendees as well. So thank you for sharing. I wanted to ask also Shalini, so given your clinical work, so you work a lot with parents and children, what are some signs that parents can watch out for in their teens' relationships? Signs perhaps that the relationship or the partner may not be healthy?
That's a very good question. And by the way, thank you for having me here, because this is such an important topic that is often overlooked and not talked about. So I am so happy to see that, you know, people are talking and are interested in this conversation. Some of the signs that I see when children are in an abusive relationship is definitely, I think number one is the depression and anxiety go up. I see a lot of nervousness and fear set in. I also see the teens start to withdraw from different activities that they like to do, the friends that they hang out. The sleep pattern kind of gets affected tremendously. You will see that. What I tell parents is to watch out, of course, like I think, as you mentioned, Sonia, is about the, I think Melissa, you mentioned about the grades, you know, flipping in and out. And it's, there is a lot of irritability sets in, isolation, you know, depressions, self-harm. I do want to say that I notice when teens are in abusive relationships, are in very stressful situations, there will be self-harm and increased thoughts of suicide. So something to watch out for. You will also see them constantly being on the devices, not wanting to engage, talk, eating actually is also affected along with sleep. Eating habits go off. They will be eating a lot less, or stress eating if need be. It depends on what is going on for the person. And a lot of times teens tell me in an abusive relationship is the fear of being blackmailed for their text, their conversations, and also if they have sent pictures and of each of themselves to each other. So I do want to point it out that the teens come into a tremendous amount of stress. Some of the signs and symptoms that I'm talking about is very typical also teen. I do want to say what I will tell parents is to watch out for if there's an increase in all those behaviors and those symptoms, then you know something is wrong. And a lot of times I do want to point out in a South Asian community, teens don't always tell their parents about what is going on. So if parents see something is off, do ask. You don't have to interrogate, but do ask. Keep your eyes and ears open. And if things get worse, of course, then you will have to do something about it. You need to talk to a counselor, or talk to the physicians, or talk to their school counselors. But just keep your eyes open.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, that's obviously very serious, but also wide ranging too. So it can be very hard to decipher, but hopefully people are able to notice these signs when they do happen. I also wanted to ask Melissa, kind of from the opposite end of the spectrum, what are some signs of maybe abusive tendencies in our kids that parents can watch for and respond to?
Yeah, that's a great question. We often forget to talk about that. We are actually sometimes have the kids that are doing the harm. So there are some few things that we can look out for. So like the unpredictable swings, things where they're maybe moving their relationships forward too quickly, for like pressuring their partners to have sex or to sexting, always wanting to be in control, looking for approval or seeking approval from others, making false accusations. We see the checking in of the phones, checking their passwords, trying to get access to passwords to their phones, putting partner down in public or in private. Something we see also is that they sabotage, right, their partners' time goals and relationships, because again, that's the isolation piece of that relationship. Extreme jealousy, or insecurities, and we also see that they're telling all the time telling their partner what to do all the time, or the physical, where you're seeing the actual harm happening, physical harm.
Wow. Yeah. I think I'm glad we were able to go over that, because so oftentimes we're thinking about prevention and protecting our children, but you're right that, for every survivor, there's also an abuser in most instances. So we have to always look out for our kids and make sure we're preventing abuse perpetuated for them as well as enacted upon them. So thank you for sharing that. So back to Shalini, obviously we have to talk to teens about these issues if we notice something coming up, or even just as a preventative measure. So if we have a concern about a teen, how do you navigate that difficult conversation? Like, what are the basic do's and don'ts of talking to them about this stuff? And how do you respond, especially to a disclosure of abuse?
Okay. Excellent question. When parents find out it's or suspect, even if they suspect, what I say is ask questions. I mean, ideally, like you mentioned in the beginning about Sonia, about keeping the door open, that is very important, that there is a foundation in the relationship between the parent and the children, that the teens can come to them. They don't have to tell them everything. They don't have to tell the parents everything, but they can come to the parents in times of need, when things go really bad and something is like they really, really need help. If that doesn't happen, it's when parents are watching out for signs, ask questions. And number one rule of that is open-ended, non-judgmental questions. That is the hardest thing to do, especially if the system says that you cannot date. but you suspect that your child is dating and is not in a happy relationship. At the time, we have to manage our anxieties as parents and as the adult caregivers, and then focus on the child's need. So don't judge, ask open-ended questions, assure and comfort. Assure them that you're not going to be mad, that you are there to help them, to support them, and comfort them that, you are there on their side. It's like, even if you don't know, but you suspect, tell them that you are there. Offer, if you cannot talk to me, how about your aunt? How about that uncle? That cousin there? How about your school counselor? I'll get you a counselor. You speak to someone else. You don't have to tell me anything. I'm here as your biggest ally, your cheer team. I'm here to support you. And that's what I teach my parents. Your job is there to support them and to, give them protection if they need to, and also pick them up if things get really bad, to be there on their side. A lot of times, just hearing that helps the teens. It really helps the teens in saying, okay, I know someone is there. So they may not tell the parents, but they may tell that cousin. I see that a lot. They may tell that older cousin, and then that older cousin will come back. They will tell a friend. The friend will come back and tell their parents, and the parents will tell the other parents, and suddenly there's more information and support. A lot of times, the friends, I've noticed, I've had teens who've asked me, my friend is in an abusive relationship. What do I do? Our families don't know each other. I barely know the parents. I don't want to go to the parents and out my friends. Well, you have a school counselor. And a lot of teens will go and tell the school counselors, I have a friend that something is wrong and their relationship is not good. There you go, you open the door. Now that's usually said in confidence. The school counselor will call in the teen and have a conversation. We heard something, and sometimes that gets the ball rolling. I also tell parents, it's like, talk to the pediatricians to have a conversation with your teen. Often pediatricians are trusted by the teens because, and they can be really, really wonderful and points of contact and resource. So asking the teen, okay, let's make an appointment, and then you tell the pediatrician ahead of time that you're worried about something. So the pediatrician can ask pointed questions, finding a counselor. So there's many different resources that are available that parents may have to use if the teen is not talking to them. And of course, if things are to the point where the child is self-harming or suicidal, then there's a lot more direct intervention that parents have to do. Number one thing, don't judge. Manage your own anxiety and worry. Often when parents get angry, I told you not to do that. What they're saying is, I'm so worried about you. I'm so scared something bad is going to happen. So come from a place of empathy.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. There's obviously many networks that a person can turn to, and a lot of times survivors feel very alone. But it's not just parents that you can turn to. There's also other people in our lives. I was actually asked for the first time by a doctor, my new doctor, just, a regular doctor, who asked me, how is your relationship going? And I was like, that's never happened before, but it's now becoming much more normalized.
It is much more normalized. And to respond to the second part of your question, which I forgot, was how to respond to disclosure of abuse. You find out that your teen is in an abusive relationship. Again, assure them that you're on their side. Let's talk to somebody. Let's talk to a counselor. Let's talk together to a counselor. It's not like something is wrong with you. Let's see how we can navigate this. If there is like bruises and, you see marks, or then, you may have to contact the police. Again, it's got to be done by assuring the child that you are on their side. And this is not about getting them in trouble, and it's not their fault. A lot of times teens, people feel it's their fault. Most people feel it's my fault. I must have done something wrong. So you got to assure them you haven't done anything wrong. Support them, assure them, validate their experience. It's like, don't get into, trying to figure out who did what and if it's right or wrong. That's not your job. Your job is to support your child, validate their feelings, and then get help, whether it means talking to the school, talking to the police, talking to the physicians, whole different things. But there are resources out there, is utilize them.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. That expertise is really helpful. Yeah. Okay, yeah. So obviously these conversations are really difficult. So I wanted to ask you, Melissa, like what if a parent just doesn't feel competent in having these conversations with their youth, especially in a lot of different cultures, or even just like if you don't have a super close relationship with your child, or you're just uncomfortable talking about topics like sex and dating. Like what if a parent is just not ready for that or doesn't know how to address it?
So I want to just say, don't let that hold you back. There's easy ways that you can engage in those conversations. And again, hopefully with the resources that we share, you'll feel a little bit more comfortable in starting those conversations. You can easily start them with your youth by just simply having conversations about like, hey, asking, how's your friends doing? What are they doing? Are they dating anyone? So again, just starting to see what they start thinking about or believe about dating. And then even having the question like, what do you think about dating? Watching a TV show together, maybe have a conversation, maybe after a scene where maybe there's been some violence, have a conversation around that. Even music is a great way to have a conversation. There's so many things out there and examples where there's just some crazy lyrics, and we can have a whole conversation about what's going on and what's wrong with some of those songs. So there's ways to start those conversations easily. But if you're feeling uncomfortable, and that's okay, because sometimes some parents are like, that's just, I can't do it. Lean onto your other trusted adult in your life. So I think Shalini was sharing some of those things of like, is there a trusted aunt or uncle in your life, an older sibling or cousin, a teacher that maybe is really great for your youth, or a school counselor, maybe they're engaged in extracurricular activities, a coach, even if they have a good relationship with a friend's parent, lean into that adult spiritual leaders in your communities, or religious or pastors, or elders in your communities. But there's always people out there that are some trusted adults. I do this in my own family. Everyone knows I'm the aunt that you come and talk to. And my cousins know this. They tell my nieces and nephews, if you want to have these conversations, your tia is always open to start that conversation with you. And I try to make that with them and have some conversations with them. And I can tell you, I've had amazing conversations with my nieces and nephews where we're talking about dating and sex, because that's their realities. They're teenagers right now, so that's what they're going through. So you can do it. There's people out there. And I think Shalini also mentioned, like when it comes to sex and dating, you have those community resources. You have the doctors that you can go to, the teen clinics, service providers. There's community organizations like Save and Narika that can have those conversations with your youth. So there is places out there to reach out to.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. I hope that gives some people some hope, because I know these things are pretty scary or unsettling, but they're still important. Anyways, Shailaja, so for a lot of parents, fear of teen dating violence may lead us to create really rigid rules. So like keep your door open, you're not allowed to date, curfew, all of these things we're very familiar with. As opposed to things like supportive measures, right? So measures that maybe employ more freedom or trust. So how can parents prevent anxiety and fear about these issues from taking over our parenting and encouraging us to take punitive measures against our kids as opposed to supportive measures?
Well, first of all, I want to say I'm so happy that we're having this conversation. I've just been completely raptly listening. It's talk about, you don't hear it enough. So actually to start sitting here as a parent, and I can listening to some of the behaviors and things, it feels overwhelming. So I would say the first thing we can all do is, just step back and take a pause and take a breath. Whenever we see our child in trouble, our first instinct is to jump in and fix it. And I think there's a moment when we can pause to say, where am I coming at this from? What is my role in this? What can I do that's actually helpful? And is the answer really stepping up control, even more control over a teen who has just experienced control from another person that is not healthy? So I think coming from a place of awareness, and I'm saying this having not done it many times. I'm not coming at a place from having perfected it as a parent, as a community advocate. I think it's an ongoing journey. So holding some compassion for ourselves, because there is no manual to parenting, but being open to learning and really coming from a place of awareness and compassion is important. I think it's also important for us to hold in our minds that if our teen is in trouble in one aspect of their life, it doesn't mean that they're not capable of managing that aspect or not capable of doing anything right in any aspect of their lives. So really, that's the time for us to really lean into the idea of trust, mutual trust, respect. We don't take teen relationships very seriously, honestly. There's a lot of conversation about academics, but do we really understand the impact their social life has on their, on their life and how important it is to them? So really taking their relationships seriously, holding ourselves in awareness, having compassion for ourselves and for them. Who in the world wants to be in pain? So we've got to not come from a place of, there is something wrong with you, which is why this has happened. And I'm not just speaking this from teen dating violence. This is what happens when we see domestic violence in our communities too. The first place we land at is whose fault is it? And did you cause it? And that doesn't help anybody. So really it's a great time for everybody to actually just practice the values of trust, respect, compassion, awareness. And it's the hardest to do when you're in crisis. It really, really is. So I often feel, I wish I had known this when my children were younger, that this relationship actually begins when the children are younger. What we practice as a family is what's going to come out in crisis. So actually before crisis happens or a problem happens is when we all should be practicing. I don't like the word should. We could be practicing. That's so prescriptive, right? We could be practicing some of the relationships because that's the pattern that our youth will fall back on. If they have seen us being open to talking for other matters, that is when they come to us for the bigger problems or some of these problems. So it's really like everything else that we practice. We practice math, we practice yoga, we practice running. We've got to practice, this as well. The healthy relationships and modeling it. So I have rarely seen punitive measures come out as as helpful. If there are agreed upon boundaries and rules we all agree on that would help keep the safety, that's a different matter. But trying to shut it out, I don't think is going to work. I think it's a lot for a parent to hold in mind and be in awareness, but I don't think there's any other magical solution other than that. So would love to hear from my co-panelists if, that makes sense.
I think so. Yeah. Did anyone else have any other thoughts? I think that makes a lot of sense. And I think that's really helpful. Yeah. Okay, so Melissa, I wanted to know, are there any resources that you would want to share that are available for parents and teens to better understand these issues? Obviously, this is a great resource, but for further reading, further education, it's always really helpful.
Yeah, we have access to the internet, has a wealth of resources available at our fingertips, So there's different organizations that do this work where you can go in and learn more about the topic. And even there's a wealth of resources where you can have some download tools to start the conversation. So Love is Respect is a big one. And they have very curated things for you, specifically for friends, for the parents, if you yourself may be experiencing violence. So there's so many things there. The National Domestic Hotline also has an extensive resource library. At SAVE, we are here, we can support you. You can reach out to me directly. I can leave my information so that if you need any, if you have any questions and support, you can reach out to me. We're working on our website, which will be out in April, that is just for our youth services program, and we will have a parents corner. So we have different information available for parents. But I am going to share on the chat line, or you're going to share for me, that this link to a parent's guide to teen dating violence. It's from Respond Inc. in Boston. And they created this guide to just it's an easy guide to like start learning what is teen dating violence, what does it look like, what are signs that you can look out for, how do you start some of the conversations, you know, what other resources are out there. So there's a whole bunch of things on this guide that it's a good starting point for parents.
Thank you so much. Yeah, for everyone listening, I did place those links and names in the chat, so please feel free to check those out for further reading. And then I also wanted to ask Shailaja again. So obviously, Narika, we specialize in serving the South Asian community. And so many of our attendees in our community are South Asian. And as a lot of you know, we don't talk about these things as openly in our culture. I mean, that's just something I personally witnessed, and I see a lot of nodding heads that probably other people witness as well. So just why is it so hard for our community in particular to have these conversations? What are the barriers, and is there anything we can do to make that easier?
I will, yes to there being silence around, adult relationships and the youth as a whole different level, because that takes first acknowledgement from us that the youth have relationships, and that really, I think, that triggers, I'll use the word trigger, that triggers a lot of fear, anxiety, shame, guilt. We don't quite know how to process or place or understand or accept the relationships that our youth are having. Having said that, I will say, come from a place of compassion for yourself, because it's important for us to realize, why is it so difficult for us? I do believe that most parents are trying to be really good parents as well as we know. But what are the patterns that we grew up with? How do we do for our youth? Perhaps something that we didn't experience ourselves growing up. So is there an intention to learn? Are we clear on what our goals are? I always feel like the thing to look forward to is, are we helping break a cycle or like a pattern that might be intergenerational? It's something we've seen happen through our family or through our childhood, and the energy and learning it takes to break that cycle. We have to honor that's what it's taking from us as parents. So if we can understand why we are doing it, how important it is what we're doing, and that is going to take constant learning. It's not just, one time I've read up on resources and this is it, I'm going to be able to show up for my youth. That's not how it is, because so many things we've learned in our childhood are going to show up. So many values we grew up are going to show up. So many things in our community, which is so collective. Log kya kahenge is such a constant thing. What's the community going to say? What's going to be the response? It's not just you're thinking about. Our culture is, we live in intergenerational homes. It's not just a question of what have you decided to do. It's a question of how am I going to take the entire collective community along, so there is less isolation, less ostracization, that we still remain in community. There are so many things that we are dealing with at the back of our minds. So the conversation is difficult. So acknowledging it's difficult, taking time to think, why is this so difficult for me? And really approaching it like how we do so many things at our work. It's not a question of being a bad parent or a good parent, or I'm just not built to do this. It's a question of, what do I need to learn, or what do I need to unlearn? Where do I need to come from to be able to offer this for my youth? And am I clear in my head that I want to offer this for my youth, and how best will it fit our family? So I do think, we are always jumping to what can be offered to the children, or do to the children, or bring to the children. A piece of that is, what are we going to bring to ourselves as parents? So parenting begins with the parent. So we have to relearn and acknowledge it's difficult. And yes, there are so many feelings, it's always seen as a private matter. What happens between a couple is a private matter. It's not seen as a social justice issue. It's not seen as a systemic problem. And so people walk away. People don't intervene. It happens for adults as well. But that's not so. So I think just examining our own beliefs, values, and trusting our youth. Just the words "I believe you" can mean so much to the youth, and especially coming from parents. I believe you. I stand with you. I come from a place of love. We'll figure this out, you know. And we can be transparent to say, yeah, I'm scared too. I don't know everything, but we're going to do this together. I think that lands us in a better place to be able to have a conversation. And the youth are so woke. They know things. They're learning things. If we ask them, how can we have this conversation? They might step forward and help us have it. You know, my boys have said, like, you think you need to have this conversation, but I know it. And I'm like, I know, but I want to be able to have a conversation. So yeah, just some thoughts around that. I'm glad we're addressing that and acknowledging, because if we don't acknowledge it's difficult, we're not going to be able to figure out the tools to remove the barriers to the conversation.
Yeah, thank you. That's really awesome. And you're right. I feel like they are so smart, and oftentimes we assume that we know best as parents. Or I'm not a parent, but generally parents assume they know best, and we're always like, no, I know. But yeah, I think it's all about trust.
There is this
Yeah.
little bit of a disconnect between what the youth are learning in school and perhaps what we are. And I'm sure Shalini, you can speak to this as well. What culturally we are, perhaps they might be experiencing at home. So there is a little bit of a gap between what the two worlds they might be having to straddle. So how can we help close that gap? So
yeah, actually that relates to my next question, was also for Shalini. So like these challenges that South Asian teens sometimes face in talking to their parents about dating, like how does all of this shame and stigma that we've been talking about around sex, sexuality also, and dating in the South Asian community impact teen dating violence?
That's a very good question. And thank you for setting the stage, Shalaja, because I completely agree. The shame and the stigma and, the judgment and also our own cultural values get in the way of communicating and having those honest communication, and hence like good connections with our children. And our children are in a very difficult situation. I remember my son when he was, I think in 3rd grade, I remember he was sitting in the back of the car. We were driving somewhere and he said, I feel white on the inside and brown on the outside. And it was like, and he was, or maybe younger than even that, like 8. I think he was maybe 6 when he said that. And what he was telling me that, look, I'm in these 2 different cultures. There's a culture at home, there's a culture here, and I look different, but I feel different. So who am I? And our children do struggle with that, straddling that fine line. I cannot tell you how many on my kids' friends, when they come in here, they take on this Indian accent, expecting me to have that Indian accent too. And when I open my mouth, they say, you don't sound like the typical Indian auntie, So no, I don't. But it's like, but that's why I think what happens when it comes to how they have to conform to be a certain way in their home versus how they are outside. And sometimes there's a big disconnect. And there's a lack of communication, because of the lack of communication, because of trust, because of shame, the stigma around, sex, dating, premarital sex. I think with SAVE, we do this yearly workshop on never before marriage, something like that. I don't remember the exact name, but it really is with teens. And we've had several teens, and pretty much most of the teens have not talked to their parents about their dating and sexual lives. Most of them, the majority of them said, our parents know, but choose not to say anything about it. So don't ask, don't tell. Policy is very well and alive in the homes. However, there's a small section where all of the teens who told us that they cannot even mention or hint to the parents that they are dating, because they have been told in clear absolutes, that they cannot date before until they get married. So now see, there's a big disparity amongst with the teens. Amongst teens themselves, they say, my friend is able to date, I'm not able to date. And because, like, Shalaja said about the different cultures. Well, I want to bring up one thing also, that along with the cultural disconnect, it doesn't just happen in high schools and schools and high schools, it also happens in college. And we don't talk to our college going students because we are so, as South Asians, focused on gotta get into a good college. Okay, gotta go to college, do whatever, you gotta go to that college, whatever. But we don't talk about what happens in college. Oh, you gotta just study hard and get a good job and have a good life. What about the other part, the social part, the friends part, the dating and sex part, the hookup culture? Nobody talks about that. Nobody talks about the drugs that come, and then being under the influence, and then having sex while being under the influence, and having all those regrets. And those teens, they're still teens, and they suffer alone, and they get into relationships, bad relationships and bad situations. They don't tell their parents. And I think that's really, really sad.
Yeah, I really relate a lot to a lot of the things that you mentioned. Number one, the cultural disconnect, absolutely. I'm biracial, so I'm half white, half South Asian, and I'm so used to that kind of code switching. Like growing up, like I'm different person, different culture with one group, different person, different culture with another group. And then I went to college and nobody knows my race. And then I'm just like, who am I? I have to figure this out now. But it's really hard. It makes things very confusing and you don't really know how to act. And then you lose sight of your real person. And obviously that has a huge impact on how you date and how you interact with intimate people as well. So yeah, that was really, really helpful for me, for you to say that. Also, you were talking about like parents like not allowing kids to date at all. That's something that is so common that I've seen in a lot of South Asian friends and just other people that I know, that they have this whole like secret life, like when curfew's over, like they have this whole like secret route or just this whole dark side to them that their parents have no idea about because they've instituted these barriers that are so difficult. And of course, that's really sad that it's so divided. And it's also potentially more dangerous because, no one knows maybe what's going on. But also that's the only way for that person to maybe experience any type of freedom. So it's really important, I think, for people to not have those barriers so rigid. So yeah, thank you for sharing that. I also, I wanted to turn back to Melissa, this concept of a trusted adult. We've all, I think, mentioned it once or twice without really defining it. So if you could share what is exactly like a trusted adult and how does one find a trusted adult or be a trusted adult?
Sure. Yeah, in our prevention work with the youth that we work with, this is a concept that we always want to bring up so that they know how to identify those safe adults in their or trusted adults in their lives. For us, the youth that we come across with, where our reach is very broad. So we go into so many communities. And the reality is the majority of the youth that we're working with, when we are talking about their parents being a trusted adult, that might not be their reality. In fact, maybe some of those parents that they have are harmful or even abusive to them. So a major key point or point that we try to make with our presentations and when we go into the schools is to let them know that there is safe adults out there in their communities that are willing and ready to be a safe adult for them. So just like how I tell the youth in the classrooms, I'm gonna tell you all, safe adults, you tell them that you care about them, you respect them, you respect their decisions and their boundaries that they put up. A safe adult is concerned for your safety. They accept you, they accept who you are. They seek to understand your choices. They take time to listen to you. They give good advice when asked, and they're reliable and consistent for them. Now, who can be a safe adult? Well, anyone can be that. If we're willing to lean in, learn, and center the feelings and experiences of youth and the relationships, we can do that. We can all be that safe adult for youth.
Thank you. Yeah, I think any adult can be a trusted or safe adult. It's just again about that openness, about keeping that door open for that young person. So yeah, thank you. Shalini, I was wondering, so we've kind of mentioned this a little bit, but the nature of dating for young people has evolved. It's changed dramatically. And I can speak to this just observing from all of my friends. It's very different. There's like hookup culture, there's online dating. Most of my friends find people through apps like Bumble or Hinge are, I think, the popular ones now. And a lot of times they may have different types of intimate relationships. Like some may be just casual sex, which could turn into something else, but at times they're just rigid. No, we're not going to actually be emotionally intimate. It's just physical intimacy. And others are, they want to start with strong, emotional, intimate relationship and then not delve into anything physical unless they've established a really strong intimacy. And so it's very different, at least from what I've seen, compared to what like my parents would have gone through and their parents especially would have gone through. So can you speak a little bit to, I guess, like what adults should know about these new realities?
I think you mentioned them already. Very well, Sonia. So
I guess
you're
I'm an adult.
you did. And I'm glad it's coming from you because I can teach the parents and tell them there's a lot of dating starts online, happens online. Sometimes your teenagers starting from middle school onwards are in a relationship, and are in love with people across state lines. They have never met them in person, have met them on video, but haven't met them in person, but they are in a relationship. And I've had parents tell me, how do kids know how to love? Yes, they do. It actually, love, they do feel immense love. It actually may feel it very deeply and intensely. I think what parents or adults are saying, they don't necessarily have those prefrontal cortex is not fully developed, so have the filters to manage a relationship, which I agree. And that's why, sometimes struggle can happen, but they do feel all those emotions that they feel, and those emotions are real. And those relationships, when they say they are in love with someone, it is true. And it's to dismiss them and disregard them is not helpful. So that's some of the parents, it was helpful for the parents to know that when a child tells you, I like someone, but they are in Virginia, be curious, don't judge, don't shame, don't dismiss. Be curious, be respectful, validate their feelings, ask questions, open-ended questions. Don't argue, because otherwise they will shut the door. And I think that is, and it's when they go off to college. Nowadays, most colleges have these 3-hour online seminars that all students have to actually finish. And it talks about sex, and especially around if you are under the influence, and consent. That's the word I was looking for. So important to teach our children about consent. It's, that when is it okay? I don't know, have you heard that song by Asher Roth, I Love College? It's one of my favorite songs. There's a line in there which he says, if she is too far gone, do not have sex. Awesome. Because in hookup sex, a lot of times people are under the influence, and things then can go wrong very quickly, like this. And and people may be affected for the rest of their lives. So it's very important to talk to our teenagers who are going off to college and who are going to experience and be exposed to different kinds of relationships, whether they're casual, physical only, or sometimes they're poly, or sometimes they're monogamous. Let's have this conversation, because at least so they are safe. They and whoever they're going to be with safe, because what happens may haunt them for the rest of their lives. So have those very difficult conversations. And like I think you all have said, we as parents have to manage our anxiety and our taboos and our shame and our judgments before we can have that, share that, and normalize their feelings. For the children, to tell the children you're going off to college, but you cannot have sex. Okay. okay, you see how far that goes. Well, they're not gonna tell you ever what is happening. So important, I think, Ash, like you said, Shalaja, is like start having these conversations and be aware of the different patterns and all the different and like dynamics from our culture and in our family from a very young age. So you set the stage to have conversations of different kinds of sex. And I tell parents, this is my favorite thing. I tell parents, middle school, high school, we got to talk about sex. We got to talk to your kids about sex. And parents said, what do you mean? I don't want to talk about sex, but they already know about sex. The school taught them. I was like, really? They talk about anal sex and oral sex? Let's talk about fingering and pleasuring. It's like, they're like, what? What? You don't want to do that. But if you do it, then at least your kids know you are aware. And if they have a question, they can come to you. They ultimately will figure it out, but at least you will normalize the whole. I know I scandalize everybody when I say that. You normalize sex. You don't normalize bad relationships. You normalize sex. You normalize connections and relationships because that's a normal part of human evolution. That's why there's 7.5 billion of us on this planet. But we got to normalize all of that. And also, in that, then you can teach them about the do's and don'ts of a relationship. What's healthy, what's not. But we don't talk about one thing. That's why we don't talk about the other part, because they go together. So yes.
Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah, I know, at least for me, like no one taught me anything. No one told me anything. They were just like, figure it out for yourself, do some Googling. And it's just so, yeah, interesting. Like, I don't know, why couldn't anyone teach me these things? Like, why do I have to figure out through life? You know, that just gives a lot more risk, I feel, if you don't know like what a healthy relationship is. Or have never seen it modeled before, and no one's actually just taught you like what is healthy versus unhealthy. It means you just kind of have to learn through living, and that's very scary and risky. So, but yeah, thank you for sharing those tips. I think those are really, really helpful. I was also wondering, because obviously no single person or family or organization can really step in and end teen dating violence. Like no single unit is ever able to end dating abuse of any kind or relationship violence of any kind. So for Shailaja, how can the community as a whole step in? Like, what can other people do to just, I don't know, end this or keep the movement going in their own way?
It's a great question. I think first of all, doing what we're doing today, this morning, you know, there are almost 18, 20, 22 of us who carved the time out and thought it was important enough for us to gather and have a mindful conversation about it. An hour and a half of our life during this busy time is not to be taken lightly. So, you know, I hold a lot of gratitude for everybody who has decided to show up today, to the speakers who are sharing, you know, the thoughts today. And some of the conversations are not easy. There's a lot of discomfort. So I think the community, when we give a message that says we are accepting, I think the community can do for each other what we are asking parents to do for the youth, to hold space, to not judge, to accept, you know, to normalize conversations. Most of all, if you see somebody struggling, don't look away. If you see somebody who has managed to raise a voice and is drawing a boundary that is healthy, but it doesn't look like that's what everybody else around them does, you could be the one person supporting that person. That one person showing up saying, I stand with you, can mean the difference between somebody actually taking the path to breaking a unhealthy relationship or rebuilding their lives. So there is a lot of power, because all of us as human beings want to be accepted. We want to be loved. We are not built to be in isolation. So if you can show up for even one person saying, I believe you, I'm standing with you, can I get resources for you? Can I just be outside while you go in to make this call? It feels like you're not doing much, but it's actually, it's the difference between somebody breaking out of a unhealthy relationship and staying there because there was just nobody validating and supporting. And really, you acknowledging that there is a problem is oftentimes the beginning of change. Because so oftentimes we are told, just go back into it. It's nothing. You can figure it out, adjust it, think about what you did, but somebody else breaking the gaslighting that might be going on in your mind to say, no, there is a problem. I see what you're saying. I really believe you. How can I just stand by you? So actually, I think the community has a lot of power as bystanders. The community is what is cited by people often for not doing something. So if we all become vocal in our expressions, sometimes people ask me, what's the point of a march? What's the point of changing your Facebook profile? What's the point? But how else are you going to show that you are a trusted space, that you stand in solidarity? We have these wonderful social media tools, let's use them. Let's show that we stand for these values. So yeah, I mean, just doing what we did today and doing it consistently, even when it becomes really, really difficult. Even when we fear if we're going to lose our friends, that's the test, isn't it? Like, are we going to lose the people who we want to move around with? That's the question I think we have to ask ourselves.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think a lot of it is those like little moments or little actions that represent some bigger stance or bigger issue. And that's a signal. Like I know at my high school, we had some teachers who just had like these rainbow stickers on their laptops, and that was their signal that they were a trusted adult for our LGBT students. I just thought that was really cool. It was just like a very small sign that they could show for any student, and that those students would immediately recognize as a sign of safety. So I definitely agree, even if it's something as simple as social media or going to a march or just standing up for someone in a difficult conversation or in a difficult interaction. I think that makes a huge difference.
I'm actually going to,
yeah, go ahead.
I'm going to add to that to say, give your money. I'm honestly saying it because we vote with our money. All of us, especially, the work, we are the heart of Silicon Valley. And I'm not saying give it to Narika or Savor, give it to whoever you think is doing the right work in the community. We don't understand the power of where our money goes, because that's where systems go, that's where policies go, that's where resources go. So, that's why even if it's $15, $10, the truth is people doing the work need the support, need the resources, and people doing the work are not the highest paid. Believe me, nobody in the nonprofit world is being paid what tech and tech individuals are being paid. So support, and as everybody can't give time, but then can you give some other resource? That is very welcome too, to whoever you think is doing the right work. So yeah, make it real, make it real in as many ways as possible. So
yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think that's really great. Just like final and parting thought. Did either Melissa or Shalini or any of you have any last final thoughts for our attendees that you wanted to share?
I just wanted to echo Shayla, the prevention is very underfunded in this work. A lot of the resources usually go straight for intervention services. So yeah, give thoughtfully for the work. And again, just, you all just learning, continue to learn and lean in, and don't be afraid to have the conversations and to reach out, because there's people ready to help and support.
I want to appreciate all the parents who came today and all the ones who are here and who have questions and thoughts about their children. I just want to say that you are the ones who hopefully can help your kids, and your children can help other children, and you can reach out to the other parents as well. Because what you learn from here, you can spread the word. So we appreciate you being here and listening and ask questions.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Yeah, that's a perfect segue then to our Q&A section, which we are opening up now. So please post your questions in the chat. I'll just go ahead and start with our first question. And you can also unmute or raise your hand if you prefer as well. So for all of our panelists, any of you can answer.
Shall we stop the recording?
Yeah, actually it's a good idea. I'll do that now.